Orien Veyron's eyes were sharp, calculating, and cold. "You're here to protect me. Not instruct me," he said, his voice leaving no room for debate. Kaelis Vox met his gaze without hesitation, her stance unwavering. "I protect what's worth protecting," she replied, calm, lethal, and unreadable. The air in the office shifted. Outside those glass walls, men feared Orien's name. Cities moved when he commanded. Empires bent without question. But Kaelis did not bend. She stood behind his chair, hands clasped, tattoos barely visible beneath the sleeve of her tailored black suit. Not defiant. Not submissive. Controlled. Orien studied her reflection in the polished table before him. Most people avoided his eyes. She challenged them. A bodyguard was supposed to follow orders. Kaelis Vox followed principles. And that was far more dangerous. Most people froze when the city turned against them. Orien had never hesitated, never faltered. He was not built for fear. He was built for control. Every decision he made reshaped the underworld, every command carried weight. In boardrooms and back alleys alike, his word was final. Kaelis, however, never froze. Not then. Not ever. Where others reacted, she calculated. Where others panicked, she assessed. Every movement, every glance, carried authority, precision, and a warning: cross her at your own risk. She did not fear chaos. She anticipated it. And when chaos came for Orien Veyron, Kaelis Vox would already be waiting. Before the story unfolds, subscribe, and step into the world where power is redefined by love. The street erupted into chaos. Gunfire echoed off the concrete walls, screams ricocheting through the alleyways. Black SUVs screeched to a halt, doors flying open as Orien Veyron stepped out, fury flashing in his eyes. An ambush. Bold. Sloppy. Move aside. Orien barked, his hand tightening on the edge of the car door. Men scrambled for cover. Panic spread faster than strategy. But Kaelis Vox didn't flinch. She stepped forward, every movement fluid and precise, as though the bullets were nothing more than background noise. Her gaze locked onto the source within seconds. Wind direction. Shooter's elevation. Exit route. Calculated. "I've got this," she said, neutral. 3 shots rang out, controlled, measured. Silence followed. The threat collapsed before it understood what hit it. Smoke drifted lazily through the alley as Kaelis lowered her weapon, scanning for secondary danger. None. Orien watched from behind the armored door, studying her instead of the fallen attacker. No hesitation. No adrenaline spike. No wasted motion. She didn't glance back as she walked past him. For the first time in years, Orien wasn't thinking about who tried to kill him. He was thinking about the woman who made it look effortless. Smoke hung in the air, curling around overturned market stalls and shattered glass. Vendors had scattered. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. The carefully planned meeting had dissolved into pure disorder. Orien Veyron stood behind a cracked concrete pillar, jaw tight, pulse steady but sharp. The bullet had missed him by inches. Close enough to feel the heat of it. He had almost been hit. Saved only by her intervention. Across the chaos, Kaelis Vox moved like she belonged inside it. Not hurried. Not reckless. Intentional. One attacker tried to reposition. She disarmed him before he completed the thought. Another reached for a hidden blade. He never got the chance to use it. Who? Orien muttered under his breath, peeking from behind the pillar. She wasn't part of his crew. Not one of his regular security detail. He would have remembered her. Kaelis paused briefly, her eyes scanning him. Assessing. Confirming he was unharmed. Then she turned away. "Not your concern," she said, her tone flat, already disengaging. Before his men could surround her, she stepped backward into the smoke and disappeared into the chaos as if it had swallowed her whole. Even in retreat, she commanded the scene. Untouchable. Unshakable. Orien stepped out slowly, staring at the space she had occupied seconds ago. Someone had just saved his life. and walked away like it meant nothing. Later that afternoon, Orien entered the office. The sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the sharp lines of his tailored suit and the controlled authority in his stride. The room fell silent as he walked in. Kaelis Vox stood near the far wall, posture straight, hands loosely clasped behind her back. She looked as though she had always belonged there. "I don't trust anyone else in this building," Orien said, his tone low but firm. It wasn't a request. It was a declaration. Kaelis crossed her arms slowly, stance perfect, expression unreadable. "I don't work for men like you," she replied. No fear. No hesitation. Most people negotiated with Orien carefully. She did not negotiate at all. A subtle smirk touched the corner of his mouth. "You already saved one," he said, letting the words settle heavily between them. Her gaze sharpened slightly, but she didn't flinch. She didn't smile. "I stopped a threat," she corrected. "You happened to be standing there." Orien stepped closer, stopping just enough to respect distance, not enough to show weakness. "You assessed the perimeter. Neutralized 2 attackers. Covered my blind side," he said calmly. That wasn't coincidence. Silence stretched between them. She studied him openly now, weighing every ounce of his presence, every calculated pause, every shadow in the room. He was dangerous. Ruthless. Precise. But he wasn't careless. Finally, she spoke. "Head of security?" "Yes." A beat passed. "If I take this role," Kaelis said evenly, "I answer to the threat. Not to your ego." Orien's eyes darkened with something close to approval. "Good," he replied. "I don't pay for obedience. I pay for results." The tension in the room shifted. Unspoken. Electric. Unavoidable. And just like that, Kaelis Vox stepped into his world. Not as a subordinate. But as the only person he might actually trust. Weeks passed. Security routines were rewritten from the ground up. Entry points were reduced. Blind spots disappeared. Personnel were reassigned without explanation. Kaelis Vox worked without theatrics, without announcement. She simply corrected what was flawed. Threats were neutralized silently, efficiently, and without error. One insider attempting to leak information was removed before sunrise. A suspicious supplier contract was flagged before it became leverage. Surveillance systems were upgraded, layered, reinforced. Nothing slipped through her hands. One evening, Orien stood beside her in the control room, the glow of multiple screens reflecting in his eyes. Footage from a recent incident replayed in slow motion, an approaching vehicle, a subtle shift in trajectory, a concealed weapon drawn too late. "You didn't flinch," Orien said, watching her on the screen as she moved to intercept. "I never do," Kaelis replied, calm, precise, deliberate. There was no pride in her tone. No need for validation. Her presence alone made the building safer. Conversations lowered when she entered a room. Even seasoned men adjusted their posture under her gaze. Orien observed quietly, hands behind his back. Respect was not something he offered easily. It was earned. And she was earning it. Not with charm. Not with loyalty. With competence. Kaelis turned off the footage and faced him. "Your enemies are getting impatient," she said. A faint, approving nod came from Orien. "Good," he replied softly. "So am I." The precision of the latest assassination attempt hit him like a cold blade. The attacker had bypassed 2 outer checkpoints, avoided the motion sensors, and positioned himself at the only angle not covered by standard surveillance. Too clean. Too informed. Orien stood over the report in his office, photographs spread across the glass table. The wound patterns were deliberate. Controlled. Executed by someone who understood anatomy and timing. Not reckless. Professional. "Is this your signature?" Orien asked quietly. Kaelis stood across from him, hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. She didn't reach for the photos. She didn't need to. One glance had already told her everything. She met his gaze evenly. A faint, cold smile touched her lips. Old habits die hard, she said. The words carried years of skill, history, and unspoken danger. Silence settled between them. You trained them, Orien concluded. Once, she replied. A long time ago. His jaw tightened slightly. Are they sending a message? They're testing you, she corrected. And testing me. A subtle shift passed through the room. For the first time, the threat wasn't just external. It was personal. Orien stepped closer, searching her expression for doubt. For betrayal. He found neither. If your past walks through my doors, he said evenly, it doesn't leave alive. Kaelis' eyes hardened, something fierce flickering beneath her calm. It won't, she replied. Because if they're coming for you, they're coming through me first. The message arrived just after midnight. No caller ID. No traceable signal. Just a vibration against the silent darkness of her apartment. Kaelis picked up the encrypted device she had not powered on in months. One line glowed on the screen. You were assigned. Finish it. Her expression did not change. But something behind her eyes sharpened. Assigned. They were not asking. They were reminding her. Orien Veyron was never meant to be protected. He had been the target from the beginning. She folded the device calmly and slipped it back into the drawer, movement steady, outwardly flawless. Inwardly, her thoughts were precise and unyielding. I don't belong to you anymore. Across the city, in his office tower, Orien reviewed financial reports and territory updates, unaware of the message sent into his orbit. But he was not unaware of tension. Over the past few days, he had noticed it, subtle shifts in Kaelis' timing, a fraction longer at certain doors, a glance toward rooftops that lingered. He observed without commenting. Testing her. Not by accusation, but by silence. The next morning, he deliberately changed his route without informing her. She adjusted before the vehicle turned the corner. He added an unscheduled meeting. She had already secured the room. If she was hiding something, it did not interfere with her duty. And that made the situation far more complicated. Because Orien Veyron trusted patterns. And Kaelis Vox had never broken one. The ambush hit like a storm. Precision. Speed. Malice in every movement. The conference room windows shattered inward as masked figures flooded the corridor. Suppressors hissed. Furniture splintered. Security alarms screamed too late. Orien was already reaching for cover when the first round cracked past his shoulder. No, he shouted. But Kaelis had already moved. She stepped in front of him, body aligned, stance grounded, eyes sharp with ruthless clarity. One hand pushed him behind the reinforced column. The other returned fire with controlled, lethal accuracy. I've got this, she gritted through clenched teeth. A bullet struck her vest, the impact forcing a sharp breath from her lungs. She didn't fall. Didn't retreat. 2 attackers dropped. A third attempted to flank. She pivoted, movements economical and deadly. Bullets tore through the room. Chaos swirled in smoke and shattered glass. Yet she remained immovable. A wall between him and death. Orien watched from behind partial cover, fury igniting in his chest, not at the attackers, but at the sight of her taking hits meant for him. Fall back, he ordered. Not until you're clear, she snapped. Another round grazed her arm. Blood darkened the sleeve of her suit, but her grip never weakened. Within seconds, reinforcements stormed the floor. The remaining attackers were subdued with brutal efficiency. Silence fell heavy and ringing. Kaelis swayed once. Orien caught her before she hit the ground. For the first time since he had known her, her breathing was uneven. You said you don't flinch, he said quietly. Her lips curved faintly despite the pain. I didn't, she whispered. And then her weight settled fully into his arms. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and blood, a cold, sterile scent that could not mask the chaos of the night. Kaelis lay on the narrow bed, tattoos streaked with crimson, one arm twisted beneath her body. Monitors beeped intermittently, a fragile rhythm that seemed to mock the violence she had just endured. Orien Veyron stormed into the room, eyes wide and sharp, his tailored suit now creased, sleeves rolled back to reveal tense forearms. "Save her," he barked, voice cracking despite years of controlled authority. His hands trembled slightly, betraying the panic he fought to suppress. Doctors and nurses moved quickly around him, but he barely noticed them. His gaze never left her. Every second that passed was a reminder of how close he had come to losing her. A faint smile flickered on Kaelis' lips, barely perceptible, weak but defiant. "You're not that easy to get rid of," she murmured, her voice raspy. Orien's chest tightened, heart hammering against his ribs. Panic, anger, relief, and obsession collided in his eyes, leaving the room charged with tension. He grabbed her hand, holding it too tightly, too fiercely, as if sheer force could keep her alive. "Don't you dare leave me," he growled, low, rough, shaking. Kaelis coughed, stirring slightly, but her eyes remained closed. He leaned closer, whispering threats into the quiet hum of the hospital machines. His fingers trembled against hers, a rare fracture in a man who had never broken under pressure. Machines beeped steadily, but to him, every sound felt like a countdown he could not control. For the first time in years, he was not thinking like a strategist, he was thinking like a man who was afraid. Her blood on his hands felt heavier than any empire he had built. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers, as if proximity alone could anchor her to this world. "I don't negotiate with fate," he whispered, voice raw. "And I'm not losing you." The room was full of doctors, but he had never felt more helpless. Power meant nothing here. Influence meant nothing. Only her breathing mattered. And when her fingers twitched weakly in his grip, relief hit him harder than any bullet ever could. He tightened his hold for a heartbeat longer, letting the fear and relief wash over him in silence. "You belong here," he said, voice low but unyielding. "With me. No one else, no one will take you from me." For the first time in his life, Orien Veyron, the untouchable, the ruthless Mafia boss, realized that power and fear could not protect what he cared about most. And that realization terrified him more than any enemy ever had. Weeks later, Kaelis had recovered. The bruises and burns had faded, but the tattoos streaked with blood the night of the ambush remained as a reminder of what had been endured. Her past, once a shadow looming over them, had been severed cleanly, no lingering threats, no hidden enemies. She moved through the office with the same lethal precision she had always commanded, every step deliberate, every glance sharp. Orien Veyron observed her from his chair, the sunlight catching the sharp lines of his face, the suit impeccably tailored as always. Calm. Controlled. Lethal. The man who ruled the city with unyielding authority. "You don't get to decide when you die," he said softly, but every word carried the weight of a man who had faced death himself and survived. Kaelis met his gaze, unwavering, her body tense yet relaxed, her tattoos visible like badges of survival and experience. "And you don't get to scare me," she replied, her voice firm, confident, standing tall, defiant, yet loyal. The office was silent except for the quiet hum of the city beyond the glass walls. Trust, once fragile and tested in fire and blood, had been forged in silence. Danger remained ever present, lurking in every corner of their lives. But they had become equals, bound not by fear or orders, but by survival, skill, and a mutual understanding that required no words. Orien rose from his chair and approached her, the tension between them replaced by unspoken respect. Kaelis didn't flinch. She never had. In that quiet moment, the Mafia boss and his bodyguard understood something deeper than power, territory, or vengeance. It was loyalty. And loyalty, when earned through blood and fire, was the only armor strong enough to withstand the world they lived in. The city still feared his name. Enemies still watched from the shadows. Power still demanded blood. But something had changed. Not in his empire. In him. Orien Veyron no longer stood alone at the top. And Kaelis Vox no longer fought for survival. She fought by choice. Not because she was assigned. Not because she was paid. But because she decided. And in their world, choice was the rarest form of loyalty. Sometimes, true strength lies in defying your past to protect the life you choose.